Hello, everyone. Welcome to NFTCON. Today's panel discussion is going to be about how Web3 is changing NFTs. And today I have two special guests, Bruno from RMRK and also Tegan Kline from The Graph as well. She's also part of Edge of Node, which is the founding team of The Graph as well. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. So we're going to go do a quick round of introductions, and then from there, we'll kind of like dive directly into questions. Let's go ahead and start with you, Bruno.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm Bruno. I founded RMRK. This is the most advanced NFT protocol in the world. I started my career with Web2 back in the day, then transitioned to Ethereum in 2015, worked on a few educational projects and developed a ton of Solidity in the meanwhile, then moved on to Ethereum 2.0 with Status. Later on, transitioned to the Web3 Foundation to work on Polkadot and Kusama. And in August last year, I founded RMRK, which became a full-time thing in June of this year, but also kind of became a team thing in January this year. So it's effectively a serious thing for 8 months now.
Excellent, and love your shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
Also on stage is going to be Tegan Kline as well. Tegan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Tegan Kline. I'm the co-founder of Edge and Node. I was among the initial team behind The Graph. And The Graph is a decentralized indexing and query protocol for the decentralized web. We help you access, or The Graph helps you access blockchain data on chain so that you can serve that data in a quick and easy way to your users. So it makes creating a dApp a lot easier. In my background, I started in traditional finance. So I was in investment banking at Bank of America, sales and trading at Barclays, which allowed me to really see the need for Ethereum and kind of creating a new financial system, a new internet about 6 years ago.
Excellent. Welcome to have you as well. And, to kind of dive into a little bit of the questions is that, like Web3, everyone has the narrative like Web2 tools and kind of like Web3. And we're starting to see a major shift of NFTs starting to use, subgraphs, indexes, and also creating new areas like how Bruno's doing at RMRK as well with basically graffitiing the blocks. Bruno, can you tell us a little bit more about like how RMRK is doing that with basically like graffitiing the blocks on the Kusama blockchain?
Yeah, sure. So the Kusama blockchain is a layer 0 chain, which is meant to connect other blockchains. And while it is kind of artsy in its kind of membership cult and nature, it doesn't have smart contracts or any logic that you could basically turn into NFTs. But I really wanted to put NFTs on top of it because I didn't want the chain to miss out on the craze. So what we used is an approach from the old days of Bitcoin, also known as colored coins, where if you imagine blocks in a blockchain like shipping containers that contain transactions inside of them, what we did was actually graffiti the outside of those containers. So we don't actually change the contents of the blocks, but we just mark the blocks in a special way. And then we have special tools and rules on how to interpret that graffiti, so how to figure out what those graffiti mean. These graffiti are called remarks on chain, and this is where the protocol got its name. So we are issuing remarks on the chain alongside regular transactions and then interpret them in a special way. This doesn't affect the chain state, doesn't write to the database of the blockchain, but exists alongside these blocks, and every node that connects to the blockchain also stores this information. So we interpret it and we make those into NFTs. We are now in the middle of a rewrite to a contract version and a runtime level version, so in Rust and so on, because now the technology supports it. Back then it didn't. But since it was the only way, we decided to, why not, and just do it as a challenge, but also as a kind of, not to miss out.
Oh, so you guys are technically just placing it as like the remarks whenever you're sending transactions, instead of placing it into the transactional data on there to kind of, mess with the blocks and everything. That's interesting.
Yep.
And also for Tegan as well. So I noticed that the Graph helps a lot of NFT projects, especially with indexing. Can you kind of tell me a little bit more about like how they're able to index a lot of the data that's on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Graph's hosted network supports Ethereum and IPFS. And so a lot of NFT platforms use both Ethereum and IPFS. We are adding support for Arweave soon, which I think will be really exciting, just as another storage layer. But the Graph helps the NFT platforms, the marketplaces, access blockchain data and serve that data to their users. So for example, the price of different NFTs and when they were sold, how many are left, all of that is on-chain blockchain data. And so the graph helps those platforms access that data and serve that to their users. And the decentralized network right now supports Ethereum, but we plan to add, or there's plans to add a lot more networks to the decentralized network very soon. And so art blocks, because they use Ethereum only, they were actually one of the first NFT platforms on the Graph's decentralized network. So all of that data is being indexed and queried in a decentralized way. There are many different indexers, which are node operators within the graph that are serving those queries quickly and efficiently. And there's a lot of redundancy. So you don't have this platform risk that, you don't have the single point of failure risk, because if one indexer goes down, there are many other indexers to serve those queries. So it's super exciting. It's kind of the beginning of that movement to the decentralized network.
So for that one, you're basically having it to where you create a database that's decentralized that allows you to really find a lot of this information quickly instead of going all the way back to like block 1, block 2 to find these transactions.
Yeah, the analogy I like to use to really break it down, the graph organizes the data that's on chain. So imagine you walk into a library and all of the books are all over the place on the floor. That was kind of like Ethereum back in the day. It was really difficult to access blockchain data. And the graph kind of picks up all those books, puts them on a shelf in alphabetical order. So that way, when you're looking for a single word, you can find that word really quickly. And that's what the indexers are helping to do on the decentralized network.
Nice. And then also for kind of like something newer that I guess like Bruno was also mentioning as well, is like kind of like creating nesting applications for NFTs. So I think like with Web3, like there's so much possibilities of creating all these new innovations that we haven't seen within the space yet. Even for you guys at the graph, indexing to making it to where the data of each sale, kind of like when it happens, where it happens, and also who's it going to, is like that informational side. But with Bruno, he said that there was a little bit about like nesting feature that's going to be happening on RMRK. Can you kind of like tell me a little bit about the nesting feature?
So nesting is one of 5 elementary art Legos that we've constructed to actually make this into a protocol that is far more advanced than anything that's out there right now. And this is actually what's really a complicated use case, and what I'd be very interested in learning about how Graph could support this, because right now we've had to build our own infra for this, and it works, but it's kind of interesting as a problem to generalize. So we have 5 art Legos, 5 NFT Legos in RMRK. One is that NFTs can own other NFTs with no limits. So you just, instead of insisting that the owner be an account, the owner can also be another NFT, no depth limits or anything like that. At the same time, we also have this concept of a base entity, which is kind of like a blueprint for NFTs. And so now if you extend from a base and you define in that base what other NFTs another NFT can actually not only own, but also equip, then you can actually have an NFT that alters its appearance based on the other NFTs that it owns and equips. NFTs owning other NFTs is a default of the protocol, so every NFT can own any other NFT, but equipping has to be specifically defined within that base. And so this is, I think, very interesting as a challenge to tackle, like data-wise. And then there's also other Legos, right? Like, for example, we have multi-resource NFTs where you can have a single resource with different context-dependent outputs. For example, if I have an ebook, that ebook NFT can have one resource that's a PDF file, another resource that's an audio file, and another resource that's a high-resolution image. And so now if you load that ebook into Audible, it'll just start playing it. If you load it into Kindle, it'll start reading the PDF. But if you load it into an environment that doesn't support anything advanced like OpenSea, then you basically see the high-resolution cover, right? And so now you have context-dependent rendering of a single NFT, which is another interesting data problem. Like, how do you visualize that? How do you fetch that information as well? And so these are 2 of our 5 art Legos that when you NFT Legos that when you put them together, you can actually construct a system of arbitrary complexity without smart contracts. And that's really, really interesting, but also a very challenging data availability problem. Because if you think about it, you have one NFT that has, for example, 5 different slots for other NFTs to be equipped into. Now, that NFT itself has a reference to some metadata. But then each of those NFTs that can be inside of these has its own reference to metadata. And now each of those can have multiple resources, which is a separate metadata reference. And now each of those metadata references has a reference to the image resource that is displayed as the NFT is rendered. So now a single NFT that is composed of multiple NFTs can have 20, 30 different calls to IPFS or wherever you're fetching your metadata from, which is a really, really tricky thing to solve when you're displaying many things at once.
Yeah, this is one of the big open problems, and it's something that we're working on. But I think it's important that you are fetching that metadata in a decentralized way, and anything else is kind of a short-term solution to the problem. And so we're really looking at kind of the long-term solution.
And I also kind of like how Bruno brought that up too, because like I'm now thinking of it like a spider web of type of like NFT nesting. Basically, you can have this would really work well for, let's say, like games that are being built on the blockchain, right? Like you can have a character that's owning a sword, but then within that sword, you have like, in order to create that sword, you have to have two ore, you know, like a handle and things like that. But then that would technically be able to be upgradable to like a gold sword or something like that. Like I think that type of nesting feature is really, really interesting. Because like if you look at like kind of like Web2 right now, like everyone's going into like ERC 1155s to try to do nest, like almost technically like almost nesting, where they have like characters that can be equipable. But also for that too, it's like, where do you guys kind of see like Web3 changing from Web2, and like what are the current bottlenecks of what's currently out there and the infrastructure that's needed in order to reach this next level?
Yeah, I think the Web3 stack is still coming to fruition. I think we need to decentralize the entire stack. And at that point, Web3 will be ready for mass adoption. Right now, we're seeing NFTs being adopted by Twitter, by TikTok, a lot of Web2 platforms. But I think that's also kind of a short-term solution. I think what we'll see is that a lot of social networks will actually spin up on Web3 once that decentralized stack is ready. And then what will win will be the platforms that are truly open source, truly permissionless, truly trustless. And we haven't seen a lot of that just because the infrastructure isn't ready yet. And I think give us about 6 to 12 months as an industry, and I think that infrastructure will be ready. Yeah.
I would mostly agree with that. I don't see this changing a lot unless we start seeing a lot more bans and takedowns from the centralized parties, because right now all of this, the entire NFT industry currently is driven by a laziness in a large degree. People will just copy paste existing projects. They will host their NFT information on centralized servers, anything to get it out before the next guy. Nobody really cares a lot about decentralizing the UI, decentralizing the metadata, decentralizing the information that you have. It's all about shortcuts, which is understandable. In a bull market, you just collect money, and then you spend that money during the bear market to actually build some useful things. So I think we're in the accumulation phase now, where teams will start caring about this important stuff when the next wave of crackdowns comes and brings the bear market with it. And then we can see some changes. In terms of adoption and everything, I think, so Michael, like you said, with gaming, I think that's it would be absolutely silly to ignore an industry that is bigger than sports, movies, and whatever else combined. And that's essentially gaming. And this is why we are also focusing on the metaverse angle with our Canaria project, and which is why we focused on deploying the RMRK2 logic on that Canaria project. So this is a live thing that we have running today, where people actually do have these NFT birds that they can equip with different items. We have a very vibrant item economy going on, and we're launching new projects that are automatically compatible with that item economy from before. So all of your NFTs are forward compatible with unrelated projects into the future. They have basically eternal liquidity, no more collecting dust. What is the biggest hurdle, what will remain the biggest hurdle for years to come, is the onboarding friction into Web3. So there is nothing we can do right now to make it easier for people to join the Web3 ecosystem without taking custody of their keys. And this is something this is a problem that deserves to have many millions of dollars of money thrown at it in terms of research and solving it. because I think that's the number one barrier. So on one hand, we can have the Twitters of the world take custody of our keys and control users' wallets for them, and then we've accomplished nothing other than flexing our NFT swag on our avatars, which is cool in its own right. Or we can go the full decentralization route, but there's no it's simply a problem of educating an enormous amount of people in the very basics of crypto and financial hygiene, which is not an easy task.
I do think, there are a lot of people cutting corners just because we do need to move quickly as an industry. But I think this is why we need to keep one another honest. And cutting corners, it should be very transparent about which corners you're cutting. And that should be a short-term solution. What's scary is when it tries to become a long-term solution, because we're not keeping each other intellectually honest. And I think there are a lot of quote unquote idealists in this space that have been building and turning away, money for centralized pieces of infrastructure, for many years in this space. I think, Sam from Arweave is one of those. Also, within the graph, many people have tried to pay us for the hosted service, centralized exchanges. We refuse that because the long term is the decentralized network, and that's where the money should go. It should go peer-to-peer in the ecosystem. It shouldn't go to one centralized company. And the content that's on these platforms should be owned by the individuals. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they own all of that content now. And that's not what it should be. Imagine the Instagram platform was decentralized and all of your images there were owned by you. And then say, someone wants to come across and buy your image. Well, you could actually sell that to them as an NFT. And I think that's really exciting. And that's really what the end game is. It's that entire infrastructure decentralized so that the users can own their identity and own their creations.
And we also saw recently too that Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, they all went offline for a good almost day. Even with these services too, it's having centralized servers. There might be an opportunity for them to save on costs, but in the long term, what happens a whole day and then kind of their stock prices go down and stuff. But with that as well is we need to create an area to where we can effectively own our data. That's the main thing about it is owning our data and not allowing third parties, unless you enable them. That might be a feature that some people might be interested in, allowing them to see certain types of data, and not all the data though. It's kind of what if I want to be anonymous on a platform and be private, but I want to allow them to see my email or something for an email list. I think that would kind of change the narrative towards it. Another area that Bruno and Tegan also touched on as well is the a lot of projects are cutting corners, and they're trying to make it for the efficiency of just getting it out there, getting it launched. But in the long term of a lot of it as well, it's if you're cutting corners in the beginning, later on, and you don't solve the issues, it's just going to lead to another area of, I would say, another. It's opening up a Pandora's box. More problems are going to be coming on, and I think that they need to kind of build first with the intention of decentralizing and also making sure that they're not vulnerable in the long term as well.
Yeah, and I'll also add, imagine you just spent, $1 million on an NFT and the platform is centralized, and then fast forward 2 years where the platform, goes away and then your NFT is gone, and you thought, you're new to this industry, you thought you own it, you thought it's there forever, and then all of a sudden it's gone and that $1 million is also gone. And so I think we as an industry need to educate against this so that people don't feel burnt by the industry, kind of like what they felt with the ICO bubble in 2017.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's also, but it's also a very, very difficult problem because people just generally don't recognize the value of censorship resistance before they're threatened with censorship. So unless somebody tries or does take away what they have own or think they own, they're not going to appreciate the ability for that to not be able to be taken away. So this is a very, very difficult thing to communicate, that, it strongly resonates with people who have been afflicted with censorship or loss of data, loss of possessions in this digital realm. But it is completely foreign to people who are just used to 100% uptime, reliability, and a normal banking system. So it's just, it's a strange thing to communicate to people.
I echo that. I do think one of the powers of this ecosystem is the token piece, and tokens kind of being used as the next evolution of the business model, so that people can be compensated commensurate to the value they bring, because it is peer-to-peer. And so maybe that's one carrot we can kind of pull people over with, on the more optimistic end of the spectrum.
Yeah, and then even for that too, like how Bruno was like mentioning banks, like banks close on Sunday, by the way. So you can't even go to banks. Well, in the US, I'm not sure, but like in the US, banks close on Sundays and they're like, we're not open, we're not available for service. Like imagine an infrastructure that already disallows you to not go to, receive your own money, right? Like your money's in your bank account. And even with like digital printing as well, it's like a lot of the circulating fiat is not like even the main supply. A lot of the supply is through digital printing. And another thing I wanted to also ask Bruno as well is like, I remember when Remark was having like the emotes, and you guys actually broke Kusama. Can you tell a little bit more about how you did that?
Yeah, so our NFTs also have this ability to accept emotes. So like in any social media messenger, you can send them emoticons, and this is a great social mechanic for sharing, but it also serves as a fantastic gauge of value, and at least relative value. Like if two similar NFTs, one has thousands more reactions than the other, this one's obviously more valuable because it evokes some sort of reaction. Our Canaria project started out as digital NFT eggs, which people could emote on, and then whatever they emoted most influenced the life of that bird when it hatches. So if you emoted with like 10,000 tennis rackets on a bird, there was a high chance that the bird would be born with a tennis racket in its hand, or something like a sweatband or whatever. And so people were really going all out on this. And then we organized an emote contest where the top most emoted eggs would actually get secondary art. And this is where that multi-resource NFT stuff comes into play, where you actually have a composed SVG version of layered elements that make up our NFT bird. So this is the dynamic rendering where you can influence it by equipping different things. But we also added secondary art that was custom commissioned by professional artists to kind of render that bird in a really beautiful, stylized way. And so you, as the owner of the NFT, can flip between the priority of those two resources, depending on which one you want to show everybody looking at the list of all NFTs. So you can actually have like two NFTs in one, just a different representation that's, one is sexier than the other, depending on your current mood. And so because people then realized that they could script these emotes to win that top emoted contest, they nuked the network with a lot of that graffiti. And yeah, it brought the network down twice. Once the Kusama network itself, because it couldn't process this many remarks. And the second time was the parachains, the chains that connect to this layer 0 network, stopped processing blocks because they couldn't process what the chain told them. It just processed. All in all, a very good DDoSing session to kind of bulletproof the entire system early enough in the game. So everybody came out happy and healthy.
Wait. So I think like this would kind of like help if like the graph was there too. Like what if you index the emotes to kind of make sure that, let's say, like blocks are kind of placed on a secondary layer through the graph to kind of make sure that, the network doesn't fall for this one. I think that might be would that be something that the graph would be like able to do, kind of like being able to source together like the remarks from each one of them, and then be able to hold it off in a decentralized database so that it doesn't query too much onto the blockchain?
Yeah, and the graph is looking to add support for Polkadot and Kusama. So some of the core developers are actually working on this in parallel with some other layer ones. So yeah, excited, Bruno. Maybe we can chat and see how the graph can potentially help.
Yeah, for sure. Though this was, to be frank, purely a protocol bug. So there's no way the graph would have helped here. We just, the chain simply couldn't process that much input. It was just a DDoS, purely a DDoS on the chain.
It was just them trying to get those tennis rackets, man. I knew it. for the birds.
Yeah. Tennis rackets, legendary poops, angel wings, and so on.
And sorry. And lost my train of thoughts really quickly. Sorry, that was really funny. Kind of like going into like some of the final thoughts as well for you guys. I wanted to kind of think of an area where you guys feel like you would want to have people really understand. So like what would be your kind of like your final reminder for the people that are listening in to like why they should really look into Web3 and start building on Web3 and start creating these infrastructures instead of just technically being lazy and going into the first realm, of the centralized areas.
I think there are a lot of people that are working on the Web3 stack. So if you're building on that stack, just being conscious of the corners that you're cutting, but other people are looking to solve the issue. So, as a dApp developer, you shouldn't have to focus on these pieces of the stack that, it's for someone else to kind of figure out, and then you to leverage that so you can have really great user experience. But I do think it is kind of the Web3 stack being fully decentralized, understanding which pieces of the stack are permissioned, which pieces are centralized, which pieces are not open source. I think that's all really important at this current state, but hopefully in the future we get to this decentralized Web3 stack where everyone just knows and is able to kind of trust. So working on that currently.
Yeah, fully agree. People should definitely keep that in mind. Also, they should maybe assign new importance to NFT technology in general. For that, they need to first unlearn NFTs as they know them now, expensive images, and need to start thinking about them as an NFT being any row of data, of any data that you can cryptographically prove you own. And once you think of it that way, the kind of new doors open up, and you stop thinking about it, is this picture of an ape going to be worth $100,000 in 10 years? And is it still going to be around? And you're going to start thinking about more applicable use cases that actually matter more than memetics. So maybe then we can finally have proper representations of real world value as NFTs, and then we'll know how important decentralization is. So once your house can become a mortgage on NFT on the chain, and once that mortgage NFT can contain information about that house's blueprints, past sale information, images, all in one NFT because it's a multi-resource NFT, and once you can actually nest other NFTs inside of it, because you can then upload, receipts, bills, repairs, testimonials, energy certificates, and everything else, then you start to realize that, wow, we actually have a fully robust, resilient global database of content that is not worth sacrificing, for like 6 milliseconds of latency through a centralized server somewhere just because it's easier right now. So I think people have to just unlearn the triviality of current NFTs and learn to see them as something much more.
Yeah, and whenever people ask me, as like, Michael, what is NFTs? And I was like, it's technically a representation of any data you can place onto the blockchain. And they're like, but I can go on OpenSea and these are all the NFTs I see. I was like, no, there's more use cases to it. Well, you look at like gaming, you look at fashion, you look at, the point of NFTCON is to kind of also show you guys all the different verticals that NFTs can also integrate. And how Bruno was saying too, like really for like the real estate market too, having it to where you can have the house's deed on there, and also for like cars. I mean, you can look at any supply chain type of infrastructure and also have this hosted as well. For example, if I have a bottle of wine in Italy, I want to know who made it, who's the people that are behind it, where did it ship to, did it stay in this warehouse for 2 weeks, why was it here for 2 weeks, did certain temperatures of certain areas, like all this information and all this data can be provided to users. It's just that we're not demanding that information right now, but we should, because all this data helps you as an individual know where it's at, what has it been through, and even for your personal data as well. You want to make sure that your personal data is secured and not being out there and being used for malicious acts or anything, or just even privacy in general as well. So I think that users should start switching and learning and switching that gear in their mind. How everyone on this panel is saying too, is switching their mind to the use cases of NFTs and the data that's going to be revolved behind it, and how to kind of make sure that data is safe, secure, decentralized as well. And yeah, we're starting to go to like the wrapping part of this panel. Quick, do you guys have any like final remarks on like where they can find you guys, or how they can also get connected with you guys as well?
Yeah. Just go over to rmrk.app. All of our links are there. Just hit any of them. There's a bunch of explainer videos, teasers, and very cool stuff that you can look at. New site just launched, so it should be pretty sexy to look at. I'm always available at Bruno at rmrk.app. So shoot me an email, or just on Twitter at Bitfalls. You can always find me there.
Amazing. You can find me at the Kline Venture on Twitter. Also, my website is just tegankline.com. You can reach out to me there. And then the graph, you can find the graph at thegraph.com or Graph Protocol on Twitter. And then Edge and Node, which is the initial team behind the graph, at Edge and Node on Twitter.
Excellent. Thank you guys for attending today. And also, if you guys are listening, you guys are a developer, make sure to reach out to these people because like for us, we want to always build within the Web3 foundation and kind of like the Web3 infrastructure to make sure that everything is moving towards the decentralized future. Once again,
one more thing. We are running a hackathon, a $50,000 hackathon, where we want people to build interesting things on and with and for Remark. So just head over to rmrk.devpost.com and check out the categories if you're interested.
There you guys go, developers, start making that money. All right, thank you guys for being on today and providing your insights. And hopefully you guys will be able to work together and kind of have the graph on Remark and kind of make sure those birds get those tennis rackets.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you guys
so much.